We're looking at a piece of what would have become a planet in another star system. This is a building block from somebody else's home.
The peculiar thing about it is that it's moving along a trajectory that is very special. When it arrives closest to the sun, the Earth would be on the opposite side, and we won't be able to observe it. But that's exactly the time when it could do a maneuver to slow down and visit us. And one wonders whether this trajectory was designed by some extraterrestrial intelligence.
You have asked me multiple times, what do I think about 3I Atlas? So guys, here's my answer. But before we start, what does that mean, 3I Atlas? So the number 3 means it's the third interstellar object ever discovered. So there's not many of them. So first one was Oumuamua. I don't know if I pronounced that right. First interstellar object discovered in 2017. Number 2 was Borisov, the second one in 2019. And the third one is Atlas 2025. The I stands for interstellar object. Could be a comet, asteroid that entered the solar system from another system, or aliens. This is what many people are suspecting. But does that make sense, guys? I have looked into this for you, and we try to really unwrap what's behind this. We try to address all the theories that are out there, and we're trying to separate the wrong ones and find the right explanation. Because this is one of the scariest and also most exciting visitors that is passing by in 2025. 3I Atlas, an interstellar object that's been baffling astronomers ever since it was discovered. And now let's see. Let's really, guys, we have to cut through the hype, and I want to bring you up to speed on what we already know about that object. And also, let's explore what might be still lurking in the unknown about Atlas.
This is a building block from somebody else's home. I mean, hard not to get stoked about that. Even though it doesn't look like much, it means a lot, and all eyes are on that developing tail. Or maybe it's not a tail, but 3I Atlas is moving closer to the sun. There's still so much we don't know.
Because you've probably seen the headlines. This is alien tech. It's a mystery green comet. So don't worry, we'll separate as best as we can the fact from the speculation. But by the end, I hope you will have a clearer picture of what makes 3I Atlas so fascinating and what new discoveries might be around the corner.
And you are talking with your astronomer buddies about the possibility that this is a megastructure, like an artificial megastructure.
The question is whether the reflection of sunlight is coming from a solid surface, in which case, as you pointed out, it could be as big as 40 kilometers, twice as big as Manhattan Island, or maybe a dense cloud of dust. Now, until recently, we haven't seen dust being pushed back behind the object by the solar radiation pressure. And so one had to conclude that perhaps we are seeing a giant object.
Let's get back to the basics first before we move forward. A quick refresher. What is 3I Atlas? It was first discovered on July 1st this year, 2025, by the Atlas Survey Telescope. Now we know where that name comes from, in Rio Hurtado in Chile, and it's operated by the NASA-funded Atlas program. There's the name. So 3I means the third confirmed interstellar object. Its trajectory is hyperbolic. So that means it's not bound to the sun. It came from outside the solar system. Ooh, that makes it, of course, very, very interesting. It passes through and then it continues on. It's not going to hit us. So early estimates have placed it at a speed of 57 kilometers per second at infinity. That's its escape speed from our solar system. Interesting is that initially the size was hard to pin down because much of the light that we saw came from its coma. It's the cloud, dust, and the gas around it. So what's the latest information about this object? So since that first discovery in July, the pace of new finding has been kind of electrifying. And what has emerged so far is that astronomers have now found earlier images of 3I Atlas, I call it Atlas from now on, that have been taken before its official discovery. Because in fact, what now came out that NASA's test spacecraft has been observing Atlas as early as May 2025, well before it was officially discovered. So that means that the comet was active and visible earlier than initially believed.
But a rock that big is 1 million times more massive than the previous interstellar objects that we've seen, Oumuamua and Borisov. That is quite unlikely. So either this is actually a dense cloud of dust that somehow did not produce until recently a tail, or this is not a rock. And in that case, maybe it's targeting the inner solar system.
Of course, these are extra data points that allow the scientists to refine its trajectory, the brightness history, and the activity on set. But one of the more exciting revelations about Atlas comes from the James Webb Space Telescope on August 6, 2025, because they pointed their near-infrared spectrograph at Atlas, and they revealed that much of the gas emissions in the coma is dominated by carbon dioxide, CO2, more so than water, H2O, at this stage. And that was intriguing, guys. And I'll tell you why. That was unusual. So everybody was wondering, because most comets that come closer to the sun, they outgas water more vigorously. And the dominance of CO2 suggests that Atlas composition is quite different from many comets that are native to our solar system. And that's why people started, what is this? What is this? Now we have sharper imaging, thankfully, from the Hubble telescope, and astronomers were able to tighten the size estimates of Atlas, of this thing. And the nucleus is constrained to be larger than about 5.6 kilometers in diameter. That's roughly 4 miles. So, but also it might be far smaller depending on how much light comes from the surrounding dust. That's what they're still trying to figure out. But what is important, some earlier speculations, especially by those invoking quite exotic explanations, had assumed much larger sizes, which are now less supported by better data. But then we had another issue. The light was behaving oddly. The polarization, where also many people said, this is weird. This is something suspicious. Because we can say that this was one of the most surprising insights. That comes from polarimetry. It's like studying how light is scattered and polarized as it passes through dust that is around the comet. And there's a new paper that has been released. And that's quite interesting because it suggests that Atlas shows an extremely deep and narrow negative polarization branch. That means a polarization signature unlike anything seen in other comets or interstellar objects before. We've never seen that before. So that creates the mystery. What is this? Again, that's why this is such a trending topic right now. How can we explain that in simpler terms? The way the light is bouncing off or being scattered by the dust around this comet, it's not behaving like anything we know. So this could hint at dust grain properties, shapes, size, or compositions that are very unusual. And it's still a mystery. More mysteries that we need to talk about is the green glow and the carbon chain depletion. When we had the lunar eclipse on September 7th, there were amateur astronomers Michael Jäger and Gerald Rehmann. They captured images that show Atlas with a green hue. Normally, comets glow green because of diatomic carbon, C2, fluorescing under sunlight. But is this the case here? Because here is where it gets really weird, guys. The earlier spectroscopic studies had found that Atlas is heavily depleted in C2 and C3. That means in carbon chain molecules. So how can it be green then? So it wasn't expected to produce much of a green glow, and yet it does. Guys, I would really say, take a cup of coffee, because this is going to be very, very interesting. And if you want me to keep going with coffee, go to the link in the description and buy me a coffee. buymeacoffee.com/silky. It's greatly appreciated, and give this video an early like and a hype. And we continue. So it gets weird. I just said that. It gets weirder, guys. But I'm trying to solve the puzzle for you in a chronological order. So, what is the explanation for the green glow? So either some C2 is now being produced or activated later in its journey as it warms, or another molecule or process is creating that green emission, something that we've not yet accounted for. Something, here it comes, new, extraterrestrial, that we have no idea. So it's really a mystery to watch that, because the discrepancy is really huge and there's no solid explanation for it so far. And let's jump to something else. It has passed by Mars very closely. So it has approached perihelion. That's its closest point to the sun, and it has also passed relatively near, close to Mars on October 3rd in 2025. And the European Space Agency's ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter, that's how that machine is called, TGO, has managed to capture images of the comet from the Mars orbit. So while this thing was in the Mars orbit or in the vicinity of Mars, the comet was too faint for some instrument to detect its tail, but the presence of a coma was clear. So there was no doubt. But then, another mystery. There was unexpected water activity. So let's have a closer look at that, because I find that also really, I'm missing the word. Interesting doesn't really mean it, because it's more than interesting, but I guess you know what I mean. So maybe it's one of the most startling recent observations about Atlas. So NASA's Swift Observatory has used ultraviolet observations, and they have detected hydroxyl. Shortcut is OH. Not Ohio for the ones that live in the United States. Hydroxyl emission. They found that. So what is that, you might ask? Okay, if we have an emission like this, guys, and here comes the mystery. This is a sign that water vapor is being released and that it is broken apart by sunlight at a longer distance from the sun than is typically expected. So in other words, Atlas appears to be leaking water in a region where that behavior is rare. Strange. And this is a big deal, guys. It's really a big deal because it hints that volatile ices, like beyond carbon dioxide, may also be active earlier in its orbit than usual, or under conditions that we do not fully understand yet. I want to make clear, we do not fully understand this thing. Hopefully, yet. So, of course, there are a lot of open questions. So what does that all mean, what we know so far? With all these new updates, let's try to put together a narrative of what 3I Atlas is and what puzzles remain, because they do. I'm not lying about this. So there is a debate. Is this an alien spacecraft? Or is it a comet?
Professor, you know, I know very early on, before we had a little bit more fidelity here, I asked you and you're like, it's probably a comet. Is it becoming less and less likely of a comet here in your eyes?
For now, I rank it 4 on the scale that I define that is called the Loeb scale, where 0 is a natural object and 10 is a technological object.
So there's a lot of people that say that it could be artificial, it could be a probe, but many people of the scientific community remain very skeptical about that theory. So the main arguments against this alien hypothesis is any of the unusual features like the size uncertainty, the odd chemistry, the polarization behavior can be explained by extreme but natural variants of cometary physics, dusts, or volatile content. The updated size constraints reduce the need to assume extremely large mass or exotic constructs. Now we know it's not that large. And some of the non-gravitational accelerations or trajectory subtleties that were claimed as hints of propulsion, they can be accounted for or challenged by a more refined dynamic modeling. So that said, it's scientifically acceptable to entertain some theories, but they should always be measured against credible data, peer review, and Occam's razor. That means do not multiply assumptions without necessity. And in connection with that, let's talk chemistry a little bit. The unique chemistry of this thing tells a story of its formation. So we have the strong CO2 dominance. We have low carbon chain molecule content and unusual polarization that suggests that 3I Atlas originated in a very different environment than many comets in our solar system, many comets that we've seen before. So perhaps it formed in a region that was rich in CO2 and poor in other volatiles. That might be a potential explanation. That it has maybe traveled through interstellar space long enough to lose more volatile ices or to evolve. Its dust grains may differ in structure, like shape, porosity, coatings, from what is common in our solar system, which could explain its odd polarization behavior. So, if it's not from our solar system, this is still super interesting. Where is it coming from? But one thing we have to make clear if we look at the alien theory, all these clues that we have now are like fingerprints of its birth environment. It's still something that's similar to something we have in our solar system, but with different variables because it was born somewhere else. Yes, it has activity at greater distances. There's the observation of brightness surging earlier than expected, outgassing, water vapor far from the sun, sustained cometary activity. All that suggests that Atlas is waking up earlier and more vigorously than many comets that we're used to. So that points to volatile ices that sublimate. They turn to gas at lower temperatures than water, like CO2, CO, or rarer molecules. So there is some explanation. But there are still many unanswered puzzles that we haven't solved yet. What exactly is producing that green glow, if not the expected diatomic carbon, the C2? What is it? How stable is that comet? Will it fragment or break up when it comes closer to the sun?
Thing about it is that it's moving along a trajectory that is very special.
Harvard physicist Avi Loeb has been tracking the object named 3I Atlas.
When it arrives closest to the sun, the Earth would be on the opposite side, and we won't be able to observe it. But that's exactly the time when it could do a maneuver to slow down and visit us. And one wonders whether this trajectory was designed by some extraterrestrial intelligence.
How and when did it leave its parent system? And through what route did it travel through the galaxy? Where is it coming from? How will its activity change the perihelion? And what parts of its interior, previously shielded, might be exposed in the future? And here, the most interesting question. Can any spacecraft, like ESA's JUICE mission or solar probes, catch more detailed measurements of post-perihelion? Open questions. Here's the timeline and what to expect. We expect the perihelion, closest point to the sun, on October 30th, 2025. So in roughly 3 weeks. Problem is, sadly, Earth-based telescopes will lose the view of this thing due to the solar conjunction. The comet will be behind the sun from our perspective. Right around perihelion, closest approach to the sun. Mars orbiters and probes, and therefore the probes may continue to observe 3I Atlas, because Mars will have a more favorable geometry. Then in November, we expect the ESA JUICE mission. They plan to attempt observations of the comet using cameras, spectrometers, and particle detectors. If that works out, it's going to be really interesting. And at the point when the comet emerges from behind the sun, it should become visible again for us, for Earth-based telescopes, from basically December onward. And then it will gradually dimming as it recedes. So hopefully throughout this time, major observatories, Hubble, JWST, ground-based telescopes, and possibly even newly commissioned facilities will continue monitoring for shifts in its activity, in Atlas activity, maybe shifts in tail shape and emission spectra. So while we will lose sight, the view of it for a bit, the most intense period of interaction as the comet feels the heat of the sun is being closely watched by instruments that are beyond Earth's horizon. So interesting things ahead, what we have to wait for. It is strange. It is something we haven't seen before, but is it really alien technology? It's an alien in our solar system, that's for sure. I will keep you updated if you like to hear about that. Let me know. Do you want to hear more about that, guys? But check out the videos in the end screen, because Canada and the US, they are facing the biggest catastrophe North America has ever seen. New study, new findings by mistake, because they were looking in the wrong area. They did a miscalculation, but then they found something that the scientists said is movie territory because it's so unimaginable. Can you believe the whole West Coast being destroyed? The major cities, millions of people. I'm not talking about the big one here or the big one there. I'm talking about something that forces combined will rip open. Not like they always say the Pacific Northwest. No, the West Coast. Watch the video here. I'll see you in a second, guys. Bye-bye.